Let's talk about histograms. This is a histogram. It's a chart of the tonal and color values of your photograph. Histogram can tell you a bit about color balance, which is something we'll get into later. But what we'll use it for is exposure. As a chart, what it's mapping is the tonal values in a digital file. You have 256 tonal values from black to white in the three channels, red, green, and blue, in which your photograph is made. The overlap of the red and green and blue primary colors creates a secondary set of primaries, yellow, magenta, and cyan. You see all of those colors represented in the Lightroom histogram. On the graph, the left-hand side represents black or dark values. It gets lighter to middle values to white on the other side. Notice this photograph visually you can see is a little dark. It's a little bit underexposed. That's represented in the graph here because most of the values are really from a middle tonal value to dark. Very few, well, no highlights. So that tells me with exposure, I can simply draw the exposure over and again increase the exposure, make it lighter, but in doing that, notice that it also spreads those tonal values across my histogram. It's a graph of the way the values exist as you edit it. So I'd look at something like that, maybe just a tiny bit lighter. Let's go. It's a little too light. How about right there? But I look and I look at the white of the eyes and the other light parts, and they still seem a little bit sort of downcast, a little bit grayed out. Also here it shows you there's really no whites. So I can take other elements here, highlights, which takes all the tonal values that are light, and I can lighten them or darken them separately from the rest of the image. Let's go back and set that at 0. Or I can take just the white values, not just the lights, but just the ones that have less saturation with color. So I could take something there and make all the values, white values, lighter or darker. So I think those are a little bit extreme, but let's see. I would probably come back here, brighten it just a little bit, about there. Then I'd look at my shadow detail. Do I want a little more detail in that shadow? Well, I can do that here by taking that shadow and making it darker or making it lighter. Essentially, any old-time photographers that used to use fill flash. This is one way you can do it just electronically. So anyway, I'd look at that. Maybe I want to fill them in a little bit or darken them in this case. I actually kind of like the darkness, so I'm going to go right about there visually. So there's the adjustments. And notice, again, my histogram shows a pretty broad selection. Still the brightest whites are still a little bit toned down. But to me, that looks better than certainly what I started with. So that's the value of the histogram. It can help you with exposure. Let me show you an extreme just to end with. The exposure, when the histogram, they're all to the left. Your image is too dark, it's underexposed. If they're all to the right, it's too light, it's overexposed. Your camera histogram can help you with exposure as well. But that's another lesson.